Okay, last meal on race day. Well, what do you actually mean by meal? So your last meal might be breakfast, but the last time you eat can be right before you start the race. The last time you eat is different from the last meal you eat. Breakfast, when you wake up, as you do, the difference is that you've been practicing it one way, and on marathon day, it's a lot of hours earlier before you're actually going to run. If you're used to getting up and running your long runs on a weekend, and you eat something and leave an hour, hour and a half later, or I hope none of you get up and don't eat anything and run and wait till later, but that's a different story for another time. You're going to eat before you leave, and you're going to try to have practiced this. It still should be similar to foods that you're used to, but you have time to digest because it's going to be 4+ hours till you actually race, right? Till you leave that starting line. So for a 150-pound runner, for example, you're going to be taking in about 200 grams of carbohydrate. That would be like a bagel with jelly, orange juice, yogurt, or a cup of oatmeal with raisins, banana, a cup of hot cocoa. You know, again, you're not weighing yourself down. It's not a ton. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be enough because remember, you're not even going to start your race for another 4 or 5 hours. So you're then going to bring a snack with you to eat while you're waiting. And then you're going to still bring another snack to sort of tip off the tank. So what does this look like? Last meal on race day, the last time you eat, as I said, so breakfast. So your snack while you're online, that might be a super pretzel. That's what Dr. Metzel was talking about with having some sodium. It could be cereal bar. It could be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It could be cornflakes. It could be a sports bar. Something easy for you to digest that sits well with you, and this should be something that you've practiced. But then right before you start to run, within 15 minutes, you can tip off your tank with just 15 grams of carbohydrate. Again, you're not taking in a lot. You're taking in just enough to bring up your blood sugar and sort of delay when you're going to start using your stored glycogen in your muscles. So that could be a sports drink or a few crackers. When do you eat a goo? Well, first of all, you don't ever have to eat a goo. So that's a very personal thing, what you like to have. There's nothing magical, although it may be proprietary. It's not magical. It's food. It's a substrate. It's carbohydrate. It is easy to digest. But there are a lot of foods. You might prefer crackers, or you might prefer pieces of cereal. You might prefer sports drinks. You have to find what you like and that works for you, and think about how much you're going to have, how often you're going to have, and how much variety you want to have. But if you do want to have a goo, understand that it provides 25 grams of carbohydrates. Sports drinks or solids or goos all work. It depends on how hard you work and how well fueled you are when you enter the race. The basic rule of thumb is that an athlete can oxidize about 1.24 to 1.4 grams of carbohydrates per minute, which equals 60 to 84 grams per hour. I just said a goo has 25 grams, but not every athlete can oxidize this much. And if you take in too much, it sits in your stomach, and or you take in too much at once as opposed to having small amounts more frequently, and you get that sloshing that goes on, really uncomfortable. It's not getting to your system where you need it. It's sitting in your stomach, and it's actually going to slow you down, not speed you up. So you need to practice and build tolerance. You need to figure out what works for you. You know, 6 to 84 grams is a lot of goo, and as I said, it'll stay in your stomach. So don't overconsume. Alternate with water or sports drinks or other foods. If you're taking in only goos or sports bars and no other solids or no other relying on that as your only source of substrate, then you need to take in water because you're not getting fluid any other way. You don't want to do goos and then take sports drinks with it, so you have 25 grams of a goo at once and then take in another, 8 to 16 grams of a sports drink on top of that. That's going to be too much at once. So if you're taking in goos or sports bars, you need to then alternate it with water and make sure you're getting in enough fluid to help with that absorption. When are you going to start fueling? 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes into the race, depending on when you pre-fueled. When you chunk your running, when you kind of think of your long runs into sort of sections and how far you're going and kind of divide it up. Well, you're doing the same thing with your fueling. You're going to be strategic in how you fuel. So break it into 15-minute intervals and decide how much fluid and fuel you will be prepared with. Drink water versus Gatorade. Well, water alone does not give you any electrolytes, specifically sodium, as Dr. Metzel talked about. So if you are taking in water only, then you have to have a solid that's going to give you some sodium. If you're going to rely on a sports drink, it needs to be a sports drink that has sodium. Gatorade does. Endurance Gatorade has even more than their regular formula. You may need more fluid than you realize. You also may need more salt than you realize. So cramp-prone athletes really need to try to get a handle on how much they're sweating per hour and how much sodium. If you have that sweat that you can taste your salt, or when your shirt dries and there's that white line across it, that indicates that you're a very salty sweater, and you probably need more sodium in your diet and in your sports drink. And you, as opposed to the general population that's all about lowering sodium now, you as an active individual, that message is a public health message. It's not designed to you specifically. If you have any kind of history of hypertension, talk to your provider about that and how to adjust and adapt. But for the most part, every athlete needs to be taking an adequate sodium. So you may need to even add a bit of salt to your Gatorade and nap rest in between sessions. So immediately after race, for better replenishment, refuel, rehydrate, two different things. Up to 30 grams of protein, whole or whey or casein. Carbohydrate is based on weight. Rehydrate before you dehydrate. Which I mean by that is you are going to feel so happy you are done. You're going to have buddies who are going to want to go to a local bar and celebrate, and that's great, but the alcohol is dehydrating. It's a serious thing. You want to rehydrate first with water, sports drinks, juices, fluids, get them in, and then start the celebration, because you're not going to feel so good if you don't.